The call came near the end of her night shift, when her feet already ached and her mind was counting the minutes until sunrise. She thought it would be another routine transfer or maybe an emergency surgery assist. Instead, a security officer in a dark uniform asked her to follow him without explanation. She had worked at the interspecies medical facility for 3 years. She had treated humans, traders from distant systems, and even children from worlds she couldn't pronounce. But she was never assigned to high-profile cases. She was steady, quiet, and good at noticing small changes in her patients. That was usually enough. They led her through restricted corridors she had never seen before. The doors were thicker. The guards were armed. The air felt heavy, like something important was happening behind every wall. When the final door opened, she understood why. Inside the sealed medical chamber lay the alien queen, the ruler of one of the most powerful civilizations allied with Earth, was lying motionless on a medical platform. Surrounded by advanced machines that hummed in strange rhythms, several alien physicians stood nearby, their voices tense and sharp. Large screens displayed symbols she could not read. "She is failing," one of them said flatly. The queen's breathing was uneven. Her skin, usually described in news reports as radiant, looked dull and strained. Tubes and sensors were attached carefully, yet nothing seemed to be working. A human supervisor turned to her. "You're assigned to assist primary monitoring." She almost laughed. Assist. She felt completely out of place. These were experts from across the galaxy. She was just one human nurse, but when she stepped closer, the noise in the room faded. Titles didn't matter at the bedside. She checked the queen's pulse pattern. She studied the breathing rhythm. She noticed the way the monitor spiked whenever multiple physicians adjusted treatments at once. Everyone else was focused on complex solutions. She focused on the small things. There was something subtle happening, something between each machine adjustment. The queen's vitals dipped not randomly, but right after certain interventions. She didn't speak immediately. She watched. She waited. And as another sharp decline appeared on the monitor, she felt a quiet certainty forming. For the first time that night, she believed the problem might not be how little they were doing. It might be that they were doing too much. She waited for the right moment before speaking. The room was tense, filled with quiet arguments in languages she did not understand. Finally, during a brief pause between adjustments, she cleared her throat. "I think the treatments might be overwhelming her," she said carefully. Several alien physicians turned toward her. Their expressions were hard to read, but the silence that followed felt heavy. A human supervisor asked her to explain. She pointed at the monitor. Each time a new procedure was started, the queen's vital signs dropped sharply. Her body seemed to react as if it was under attack. The nurse suggested reducing the number of simultaneous interventions and allowing the queen's system to rest. It sounded simple. Too simple, maybe. But she had seen fragile patients decline because their bodies could not keep up with aggressive treatment. There was hesitation. These were advanced experts with technology far beyond Earth's hospitals. Still, the numbers on the screen were hard to ignore. After a tense discussion, they agreed to scale back. One by one, the extra procedures were paused. The room grew quieter. The machines hummed more softly. She stepped closer to the bedside. Without the constant adjustments, she could finally observe the queen's natural rhythm. The breathing, though weak, became slightly steadier. The sharp drops on the monitor softened. It was not a miracle. It was small, but it was something. She adjusted the lighting in the chamber, lowering the brightness. She requested stable room temperature and minimal movement around the platform. When others questioned her choices, she simply said, "Let her body try." Hours passed. She remained beside the queen, checking fluid balance, watching muscle tension, tracking subtle changes in skin tone. She spoke in a calm voice, explaining each action before she did it. She wasn't sure the queen could hear her, but she believed patients deserved to know what was happening to them. By the middle of the shift, a quiet change settled over the room. The vital signs were no longer crashing. They were fragile, but steady. One of the alien physicians reviewed the data twice, then a third time. "Stabilization," he said softly. It was the first hopeful word spoken all night. She didn't celebrate. She knew stability was not recovery. But as she checked the Queen's pulse again, she felt something shift inside her. Maybe being just one human nurse was not a weakness in this room. Maybe it was exactly what the Queen needed. The improvement continued. But something about the Queen's condition still felt wrong to her. Stability had returned, yet the recovery was slower than expected. The nurse had learned to trust small details, and a small detail was bothering her. During each routine check, she noticed a faint pattern in the Queen's blood readings. Certain levels would rise slightly, then fall again, as if something was still interfering. It was subtle, easy to miss among all the complex data on the screens. She began documenting everything carefully. Timestamps, monitor reactions, medication intervals. She did not accuse anyone or suggest dramatic conclusions. She simply gathered facts late in the evening while reviewing the numbers again. She noticed the pattern lined up with a specific nutrient supplement that had been added to the Queen's system days before she arrived. It was approved, official, cleared by the Queen's own medical council. Still, the timing felt too exact. She requested a quiet review of the compound. At first, the request was brushed aside. The supplement came directly from the Queen's homeworld. Questioning it meant questioning their authority, but she showed them the data, calmly, line by line. After several tense hours, the lab team agreed to run a deeper scan. The room felt colder while they waited for results. Diplomats moved in and out of the hallway outside the chamber. Their voices hushed. When the analysis returned, the silence inside the room was different. The supplement contained harmful agents, low-acting, difficult to detect, and designed to weaken over time rather than cause sudden collapse. The nurse felt her stomach tighten. This was not a natural illness. Security was notified immediately, but she stayed focused on the patient. The contaminated supply was removed. A cleansing protocol began under careful supervision. Within hours, Queen's vital signs responded more clearly than before. The fog that had seemed to cloud her system began to lift as the shift neared its end. The nurse leaned closer to check the Queen's eyes. For the first time, there was awareness looking back at her. Weak, tired, but aware. The nurse offered a reassuring smile. There was still danger in the air. Questions about betrayal would shake governments and alliances. But at that bedside, none of that mattered. What mattered was that the Queen was still fighting, and now. Finally, she had a fair chance to win. Security in the facility doubled overnight. Guards stood at every entrance, and access codes were changed without warning. News of the contaminated supplement had spread quietly among high officials. No one said the word betrayal out loud, but everyone felt it. Inside the medical chamber, however, the atmosphere was different. It was calmer now, focused with the harmful agent removed from the Queen's system. Treatment shifted from crisis control to recovery. The nurse monitored her closely, adjusting fluids, checking circulation, and watching for any sign of relapse. She made sure the room stayed quiet. Fewer voices, fewer sudden movements. The Queen's strength returned slowly. Her breathing no longer struggled against the machines. Her skin regained some of its natural tone. Even the alien physicians, who had once doubted the nurse's suggestions, now consulted her before making changes. One evening, as the lights were dimmed to allow rest, the nurse noticed a small movement. The Queen's hand shifted slightly against the platform. She stepped closer. The Queen's eyes opened. They were not fully clear yet, but they were aware. Focused, searching. The nurse spoke gently, explaining where she was and what had happened in simple terms. She kept her tone calm, steady, the same way she would with any patient waking from a long illness. For a moment, there was silence between them. Then the Queen's fingers tightened faintly around the edge of the sheet. It was a small action, but it carried weight. Over the next few days, strength returned, bit by bit. The Queen was able to sit up with assistance. Her voice, though weak, formed careful words. Officials requested immediate meetings, eager to discuss security and political consequences. But the Queen refused until she could stand on her own. The nurse helped her through each step literally, supporting her balance, counting slow breaths, encouraging patience instead of haste. The turning point came when the Queen managed to take a few steady steps without collapsing. The entire medical team watched in quiet disbelief. Later that evening, before any public statement was prepared, the Queen requested a private moment. When the room cleared, she turned toward the nurse, in a voice still rough but clear. She said, "You saw what others missed." The nurse lowered her eyes. Unsure how to respond, she had only done what she always did. But in that quiet room, it was clear that something far greater than one life had been saved. The day the Queen walked out of the medical chamber, the entire facility felt different. Staff members who had moved quietly for weeks now stood a little taller. The tension that once filled the halls had eased, placed with cautious relief. Outside, representatives from multiple worlds waited for an official statement. Rumors had already spread across networks. Some believed the alliance between civilizations would collapse. Others feared retaliation. Everything depended on what the Queen would say. Before stepping in front of the cameras, she asked for one more check from the nurse. The nurse adjusted the final monitor, checked her pulse, and made sure her balance was steady. "Don't push yourself too hard," she said gently, the same way she would to any recovering patient. The Queen gave a small nod. When the public address began, the room fell silent. The Queen spoke slowly but clearly. She confirmed that her illness had not been natural, and that those responsible would be dealt with through lawful and measured action. There would be no sudden retaliation, no rushed decisions. Then she paused. Instead of praising generals or advanced technology, she spoke about care, about observation, about patience. She acknowledged the human nurse who had noticed what others missed and who had treated her not as royalty, but as a person fighting to survive. The cameras briefly turned toward the nurse standing in the background. She felt heat rise to her face. She had never wanted attention. She had only wanted her patient to live. Messages of gratitude poured in from both human and alien communities. Many called her a hero. She didn't feel like one. The next morning, she returned to her usual shift. There was a child from a mining colony with a fractured arm, an elderly trader recovering from surgery, a tired technician who needed stitches, regular people with regular fears. She washed her hands, reviewed her charts, and began again. The Queen's recovery became a symbol of trust between worlds. Peace talks resumed with renewed strength. Security improved. Cooperation deepened. But in the quiet rhythm of the hospital floor, none of that changed how she worked. She still listened carefully, still watched for small signs others might overlook, still believed that sometimes the simplest care could make the greatest difference. In the end, she was never just one human nurse. She was proof that even in a galaxy filled with power and politics, steady hands and a compassionate heart could hold everything together.